I still taste the whiskey on my lips, the same brand she used to pour for me each Friday night after I'd come home from the office. Before all of this, tonight, I sip it alone in the quiet living room, the burn racing down my throat, conjuring a memory that used to make me feel cherish. Now it only tastes of poison. I swirl the amber liquid in the glass, watching the tiny wave crash into the sides. We used to do the same. Crash into each other, cling, then recede. That was before I discovered the letter, the paternity test, and everything else that twisted my life into a cold, methodical plan. I close my eyes, remembering one perfect evening years ago. Liz had lit candles and played soft jazz, the two of us dancing barefoot on the wooden floor. I loved how her hair smelled of rose shampoo and how she pressed against me when the music slowed. We joked about the kids being asleep upstairs, how we needed to be quiet. I thought it was a secret thrill, us being parents and lovers both. She traced the rim of my glass with her fingertip, then leaned in for a quick kiss, laughing because the whiskey tasted strange on her lips. That memory is now warped, tainted by what I know. Because the entire time, she must have believed she could do better, or do different, or do Sam. I found out everything by accident, or maybe it wasn't an accident at all. She'd received a letter at the mailbox near the front gate, a letter from Sam. He wrote his confessions as if he had no shame, or maybe he was just that sure of himself. I love you more than words. I can't wait to hold you again. All that kind of garbage. The envelope was addressed to my father's old place, which we kept after his death. She'd never bothered to hide it well. She claims it was a mistake, that she was confused about which mailbox to use. But I wonder if it was her subconscious wanting me to find it. Sometimes I think she wanted me to blow our marriage apart for her. I confronted her with the letter that night, not with screams but with a question. Where did this come from? She froze. I remember her face. Half guilt, half relief. She didn't even try to deny it. She just stared at the worn edges of the paper, tears making her eyes glisten under the lamp. She said, "It's not what you think." But that was a lie. It was everything I thought, and more. An affair. Even the word feels too neat for the kind of betrayal it unleashed. I felt my world tilt. My mind tried to sum it up in a single breath. The woman I built a life with, the mother of my kids, had been finding passion. Maybe love, she claimed, in another man's arms. I listened to her voice tremble as she tried to explain. It started before we moved to Phoenix. He and I used to be together back in college. I was lonely, Mike. She kept piling on the excuses, words that only scratched the surface of what she'd done. But the letter was just the beginning. 2 nights later, I found a second shock, the paternity test. Our younger child, my sweet boy with the lopsided grin, who laughs at my dumb dad jokes, he wasn't mine. I went into the hospital records. I looked at the timing. I confronted Liz in the same calm tone, that whiplash of an interrogation style I'd learned from my years in sales. Keep your voice level, ask precisely, wait for the response. She couldn't even get a full sentence out. She just sobbed. I remember the color draining from her face as she admitted, "He's Sam's child." I wanted to scream, but something inside me went ice cold instead. The desire for revenge replaced the heartbreak. And I realized in that moment that cold is also an emotion, maybe the deadliest one. It never roars. It creeps and chills. It seeps into the bones. I told her to leave me alone. Told her, "We'll talk tomorrow," and then locked myself in my office. I didn't cry. I wish I had. It might have helped. Instead, I stared at the pictures on my desk. The older child, my daughter, definitely mine. Then the younger one, the boy who calls me dad. And through the haze of whiskey and heartbreak, an idea began forming in the back of my mind. I started mapping out how to kill trust in 3 steps. Not hers, she'd already crushed mine, but the trust that she and Sam held in the security of their deception. Step 1. Gather everything that made this house a home. Step 2. Let the tension simmer. Step 3. Strike when they least expect it. She thought I'd accepted it after that, or at least that I'd put some bandage over the wound. She slept in the guest room for a week, texting me from across the hall. "Can we talk? Please let me in." I said nothing. I watched her attempts to keep normalcy for the kids, my daughter, our younger son. And I studied them, noticing how the boy's eyes matched Sam's more than mine, noticing every time she flinched at me from across the dinner table. She tried to hold my gaze, but I'd glance away, measuring the next step, the next inch of my plan. That same week, I discovered a receipt from a local hotel, dated about a month earlier. The clerk recognized her name and Sam's, said they rented a room for the afternoon. That's when I realized I wanted to see it for myself, not just read about it or guess. My pride demanded that final bullet of proof. And so I followed her one day, told the office I'd be out for client visits. In reality, I parked outside an art studio downtown. I knew she was meeting Sam there. She'd let slip in a text about helping him with a new project. I waited. The Arizona sun blazed overhead, but I felt cold inside. At some point, she emerged from her car, wearing one of those blouses that used to drive me wild. Light, airy, with a low collar, and a skirt hugging her hips. Sam greeted her at the studio door, a tall guy with that messy hair and a painter's smock loosely tied around his waist. They didn't notice me across the street. It stung how easy it was for them to just walk in together, laughing as if they had no conscience at all. After a while, I left my car and slipped into the alley near the side exit, scanning for a way in. I found a cracked window, the kind that tilts open at the top. Enough space for me to catch a glimpse of them in the back room. I could smell paint, turpentine, and something else, maybe the faint musk of sweat. My heart was pounding, my palms slick with sweat, but my mind was strangely calm. They were there, half hidden behind a canvas that Sam had set aside. She was leaning against a table strewn with charcoal sticks, her face lifted to his. Sam's shirt was off, and she had her fingers brushing over his chest, a playful smile on her lips. Her voice was low, breathy. "We don't have long," she murmured, and he smirked, answering in a tone too quiet to catch every word, but loaded with meaning. "I just need you right now." My stomach twisted. I couldn't tear my eyes away, even as my pride screamed to turn and leave. Sam stepped closer, pressing himself into her. Her breath caught. With one hand, she reached around his neck, pulling him in for a kiss. It was the kind of kiss I used to think belonged only to us. Hungry, urgent, the kiss of two people who couldn't help themselves. But here it was, in plain sight, with another man. I watched his hand slide beneath the hem of her skirt, hooking around her thigh. She gasped, arching her back against the table. Something fell. A paintbrush or a jar of turpentine. I'm not sure. They'd barely noticed. He whispered something in her ear, making her grin, and in that moment, they were locked in each other's arms, her blouse slipping off one shoulder, his hand disappearing under the fabric. She let out a soft moan. The sound of it tore through me, twisting in my chest like a knife. They were lost in each other's warmth, pressed together, the air crackling with tension. I felt a wave of nausea, but at the same time, a cold fury welled up inside. This was them. This was what they shared. Not just an affair, but the raw passion that she must have decided she couldn't get from me anymore. I clenched my teeth, feeling my pulse hammer so loud I worried they might hear it. They were too focused on each other. The erotic undercurrent in that room thickened the air. Her body arched, his hands roamed, and I stood there, painfully aware of every detail. Finally, he spun her around, and they half laughed, half groaned, as if every second counted. I forced myself to back away before I witnessed more than I could stand. There was no question left. I had all the evidence in the world. But I didn't run or scream or bang on the door. I just left, slowly, quietly, pulling the window shut so there'd be no sign I was there. My mind was already working the next gear. By the time I got to the car, I felt eerily composed. I stared at my own reflection in the rearview mirror, noticing a tightness around my eyes I hadn't seen before. I just watched my wife cheat on me, heard her moan for another man, and I was still functioning. The betrayal formed an iron cage around my emotions. Step 1. Gather everything. I started collecting. Old letters, photos from when she and I first met, the drawings the kids made, the small socks and baby blankets, every reminder of the life we built. I put them into boxes and labeled each with a silent fury. On the outside, I was polite around Liz, telling her, "I need some space. I'm just organizing old stuff." She nodded wearily. She must have sensed something was off, but she was too nervous to press me. She slept in our bed again after that week, no longer waiting in the guest room. But there was no closeness, no warmth. At night, I lay awake, feeling her breathing next to me. Sometimes she'd place a hand on my back, gently, but I'd pretend to be asleep. Our younger child, that boy with Sam's eyes, would waddle in sometimes, hugging me, calling me Dad. My heart would twist because I still loved that kid fiercely. It wasn't his fault. It was never his fault. She spent more time away from home. I pretended not to notice. Meanwhile, I was planning. Because if Sam thought he'd gotten away with it, if Liz thought I was just going to swallow it and move on, they were mistaken. I was beyond tears, beyond anger. I wanted them to feel what it was like to have the ground pulled out from under them. Step 2. Let the tension simmer. I let her see me systematically dismantle a home, bit by bit. I took pictures off the walls. I sorted old mementos into neat stacks on the dining room table. She asked me once, "Why are you doing this?" I answered, "I just need clarity." My tone was even, my eyes on hers, unwavering. She looked unsettled, but said nothing more. At the same time, I made sure to be painfully kind to the kids. I played board games, I read bedtime stories, I went to my daughter's soccer practice. I wanted to keep their routine stable. They were innocent. But every quiet moment alone with Liz, I made sure to let the silence speak. No arguments, no accusations, just a cold, unbearable quiet. She'd stand in the kitchen, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt, searching for something to say. If she tried, I'd nod or give short, clipped answers. That tension weighed in the house like a storm cloud. Meanwhile, I caught glimpses of her phone lighting up with Sam's name. Sometimes she'd step outside to take the call, her voice low, anxious. I wondered if she was telling him that maybe the situation was turning, that maybe I was suspicious. If only she knew how deep my suspicion ran. If only she knew I had the letter, the paternity test, the memory of seeing them entwined. Step 3. Strike when they least expect it. I waited until the perfect day. A Saturday when the kids would be at my sister's place. Liz had arranged for a short visit so she and I could talk. That was her official reason. In truth, she wanted a few hours alone with Sam. She'd said something about helping him set up for a small gallery exhibit. She assumed I'd be in my office or maybe go out for groceries. But I was done letting them call the shots. In the morning, I quietly handed Liz the car keys. "Take my SUV," I said. "Yours needs an oil change." She blinked, a little surprised, but accepted the keys. I told her, "I'll meet you back here at 5. No explanation. She left, uncertain. The moment the door closed, I set my plan in motion. I spent hours packing up the boxes into my pickup truck, careful not to leave a single trace behind. Old pictures, baby clothes, even the postcards we collected. I left a single pot on the stove, half filled with water, and a lonely coffee mug on the counter. Everything else, gone. The house felt hollow. The echo of my footsteps unnerved me. But I reveled in it, imagining the moment she'd return. I took one last look at the living room where we'd danced so long ago, the place that once smelled of candle wax and her perfume. Now it smelled of dust and heartbreak. I left the ring of keys on the table, next to a small digital recorder. By 4:30, I was at a bar downtown, nursing a single whiskey. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same burn on my lips that once signified our bond now reminded me of the betrayal. I watched the clock, tension coiling in my gut. By now, she and Sam would have met. Maybe they were at his studio or a hotel again. Then the realization. Eventually, they'd come back to the house. She'd be expecting me to be there, maybe half-broken but quietly forgiving. Or maybe she planned to bring Sam along, to corner me with some ridiculous request for understanding. I pictured the look on her face when she walked into that empty shell of a home, discovered everything had vanished. I pictured Sam standing beside her, realization dawning that I wasn't a fool, and that I would never be a passive victim. I turned the place into a giant question mark, a vacuum that would swallow any illusions they had of moving forward calmly. But that wasn't the final stroke. While I stared at the swirling whiskey, I pulled out my phone, opened the cloud storage. I had a single audio file. My own voice. I'd recorded myself last night, after finishing step 2. My voice was low, steady. "He's gone because of you," I said, referencing my father, referencing the child that isn't mine, referencing the man I once was who had died inside the day I saw them together. And now it's your turn. A cryptic threat, carefully worded to freeze their blood. I left it on loop in the digital recorder at the house, set to play the moment someone turned on the lights in the living room. I paid for the whiskey, my heart thudding like a drum. A part of me wondered if I should stay away, let them crumble in the silence. But something drew me back. I needed to see it with my own eyes. So around 5:30, I pulled my pickup truck across the street from our house. From that vantage point, I could see the front door, the lights, everything. I waited. Around 6, Liz's SUV rolled up. Sam was in the passenger seat. My jaw clenched at the sight of them together. Liz parked, and they got out, glancing around like guilty teenagers. She had a hand on her forehead, maybe a headache or anxiety. Sam wore that same calm expression, the quiet confidence of a man who rarely faces consequences. They walked to the front door. The moment Liz switched on the lights, I saw their bodies tense. The living room was empty, stripped of the cushions, the family photos, everything. I could almost taste her panic from across the street. She called my name, her voice muffled but urgent. Then Sam said something, pointing at the bare walls. Liz took a few steps inside, reached for a light switch. That was when the voice on the recorder kicked in. Even from where I sat, I could make out the tinny echo of my own words. "He's gone because of you," it repeated. "And now, it's your turn." The color drained from Liz's face. She spun around, searching for me or for some explanation. Sam moved behind her, scanning the corners of the room like he expected me to jump out with a baseball bat. For a moment, they just stood there, pinned by the tape loop. Liz covered her mouth. Sam tried to open the hallway door, but that was empty too. I started the engine, letting it idle. My emotions churned in my gut. Triumph, rage, heartbreak, relief. In that second, I understood what it meant to choose revenge. It doesn't heal anything. It just shatters the remains into dust. But I couldn't stop. I pulled away from the curb, quietly, making sure not to draw attention, and drove around the block, reparking in the next street over. I made my way back on foot, slipping around the side of the house, finding the kitchen door slightly ajar. They were still in the living room. Liz was trembling, tears in her voice. "Where are my kids' things? Where's Mike?" Sam kept shaking his head, mumbling curses, telling her to calm down. I approached, footsteps silent. The digital recorder repeated, "And now, it's your turn," over and over. Finally, Sam spotted me. "Mike," he said, voice low, uncertain, like he was seeing a ghost. Liz turned, eyes wide, relief and terror mixing in her gaze. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The only sound was that cold whisper from the recorder. Then I stepped forward, plucked the recorder off the table, and switched it off. The silence roared in my ears. She stammered, "What is this? Where is everything?" I answered calmly, as though I were giving a statement in a police interview. "It's gone. Donated, trashed, or stored. Doesn't matter which. This isn't your home anymore. Not for either of you." Sam started forward, raising a hand in a feeble gesture, like he might try to reason with me. I glared at him. "Don't," I said. The single word held more threat than I had ever imagined I was capable of. Liz's tears streaked her cheeks, her voice cracking. "Where are the kids? You can't just—" "They're fine," I interrupted, my tone measured. "Safe at my sister's. They don't need to see this." She shook her head, taking a shaky breath. "Mike, I'm sorry. I know how much I've hurt you, but you can't just— You can't tear our lives apart like this." My laugh was low, humorless. "I can. And I did. You tore us apart first." Sam tried to step between us, posture tense, hands raised as if calming a wild animal. "Look, Mike, let's talk. Man to man." I shot him a glare that practically pinned him to the spot. "Man to man," I repeated, an edge slicing my words. "That's interesting, coming from the guy who wrote love letters to my wife, fathered my son behind my back, and couldn't even bother to hide it." He paled. I saw a flicker of shame, maybe regret, but he pressed on. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way. Liz and I." I cut him off with a clipped, "Don't you dare say her name to me. Not like that." My heart hammered, but I kept the calm front. "You took something that wasn't yours." Liz tried again, voice trembling. "Please, it was a mistake. But I love you, Mike. I never wanted." I snapped. "You wrote that letter to my father's old house. Or Sam did. Doesn't matter. That was your choice, your secret. And you let me raise a child that isn't mine without telling me the truth." Tears ran down her cheeks. Sam opened his mouth, but I silenced him with a raise of my hand. I stared at Liz, letting the tension build. "You want to talk about mistakes? This is my final word. I'm done. I can't stop you two from being together now. Maybe you'll run off, find some new place to paint each other naked, but you won't do it here." She made a strangled noise, half a sob. The kids come with me," I said, cold as steel. "At least until the courts figure out what's what. My daughter is mine, biologically and emotionally. My son—" I paused, swallowing. "He calls me Dad. I'll protect him, even if Sam is the father. But neither of you are welcome under my roof anymore. You lost that privilege." Sam exhaled, shoulders sagging in a mix of anger and resignation. "We can't just— There's got to be a better way, man." "Better for who?" I asked. My voice was so calm it felt eerie. "For you two. So you can keep lying. It's done. You're both old enough to deal with consequences. You want a fresh start. Take it. Somewhere else." Liz reached out, touching my arm with trembling fingers. Her eyes were desperate. "Mike, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. I can't lose my children." I stared down at her hand. In another life, I would have taken it in mine, comforted her. Now, I stepped back, letting her hand drop. "You should have thought of that before sneaking around with him." I turned away from them, stepping toward the kitchen. Over my shoulder, I said, "If you're still here when I come back, I'll call the police." "Trespassing." "You can't do that," Sam barked, voice tense. I shrugged. "Watch me." Then I crossed the threshold, stepping out into the warm evening air. The sky was darkening, the first few stars peeking through. A mocking peace hung in the suburban hush. I walked to my truck, the same truck I'd filled with every scrap of what used to be our family's memories. I could almost feel their presence behind me, stunned, trying to process the nuclear blast I'd just unleashed. For a moment, I stood by the open door of my truck, breathing hard, letting the adrenaline surge through my veins. I thought about returning, screaming at them, demanding they fix the unfixable. But I knew that was pointless. Instead, I got in, started the engine, and drove away. The plan had been executed. The trust had been killed. Now I had to face the aftermath. As I drove, headlights sweeping across asphalt, I realized my hands were shaking on the wheel. My mind reeled with the finality of what I'd done. I'd effectively ended our marriage in one brutal stroke. I'd shattered Liz's illusions of a quiet resolution, destroyed Sam's illusions of continuing in secret. And now I was left with a hollow victory. I parked at a deserted overlook near the edge of the city, facing the wide sprawl of lights. The desert night was cool, a light wind rattling through the scrub. I cut the engine and sat there in the darkness, my breath rasping. That taste of whiskey lingered in my mouth. I thought about my father, about how I'd told Liz once that this was my inheritance, a small bottle he used to keep in his desk, a symbol of simpler times. "He's gone because of you." The words from the recorder echoed in my head. In truth, my father passed away years before this affair, but part of me blamed her for erasing what little stability he'd given me. The Mike I was before discovering her secret was gone too. And now, it's your turn. That was the threat. A vague, ominous promise that they'd both pay for turning my life into a lie. I wondered if I should have done more or less. Should I have dragged Sam out by his collar, forced him to his knees, made him beg? Should I have let Liz speak her apologies? Could this pain have been softened somehow? Then I recalled seeing them in that studio, her body pressed to his, the heat in her eyes. They never gave me a chance to bow out gracefully. They took what they wanted and left me with ashes. My phone buzzed. Liz's name lit the screen. I let it ring, ignoring the tightness in my chest. She called again. A minute later, a text came through. "Mike, I know you hate me right now. Please just tell me where the kids are. I'm so sorry." I typed back a single line. "They're safe with my sister. You'll get to see them. But not tonight." She texted again, something about needing to talk, that we could sort this out. I turned off my phone, letting the darkness settle in. I gripped the steering wheel, my mind drifting through the memory of her moans with Sam, her eyes closed in bliss, the betrayal that slapped me in the face. The scalding rage inside me had cooled into something numb, something I wasn't sure I'd ever break free from. I told myself I'd done what needed doing. I told myself I was protecting my children from a mother who'd let them live a lie. But the raw truth, I wanted her to hurt. I wanted Sam to feel powerless, just like I had. Eventually, I started the engine again and drove to a motel off the highway. A cheap place with flickering neon signs. I left the boxes in the truck, took only a duffel bag of clothes and a few valuables I'd managed to salvage. The receptionist gave me a key, barely looking up from a magazine. Room 214. I climbed the concrete steps, footsteps echoing in the open corridor. In the room, the air conditioner hummed, blowing stale air. I flicked on a lamp. The bedspread was a thin floral pattern, the walls a sickly shade of pale green. I set my bag on the worn armchair. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, resting my head in my hands, exhaling for what felt like the first time in hours. What now? The kids. The custody. The unstoppable avalanche of divorce attorneys, heartbreak, and new routines. That was tomorrow's battle. Tonight, I had nothing left except the hollow triumph that I'd leveled the playing field. The revenge that I'd tasted was bitter, not the sweet release I'd imagined. But it was done, and I couldn't take it back if I tried. So I did the only thing left. Took out a half-empty whiskey bottle from my duffel bag. Poured a shot into one of the plastic cups they provide in cheap motels. Lifted it to my lips, downed it in one burning swallow. The memory of her, of us, lingered like smoke, but the taste had changed forever. The night passed in restless half-sleep. My dreams were jumbled images. Liz crying in the living room, Sam's smirk, my father's old house. I saw the kids too, my daughter's anxious face, the boy's bright smile, both of them calling me Dad. I woke in a sweat, The sheets twisted around my legs. The bedside clock read 4:12 a.m. I sat up, swinging my feet to the floor. My heart pounded. My mouth was dry. The hum of the air conditioner sounded unnaturally loud. I realized I was alone, more alone than I'd ever been. I rubbed my chest, as if to soothe an ache beneath my ribs. I tried to steady my thoughts. The next step would be to contact a lawyer, arrange living situations, figure out how to protect the children. But none of that felt real yet. The only thing I felt was an emptiness where my marriage used to be. I wanted to see my son, my daughter, hold them, tell them they were safe. But I didn't want them to witness the aftermath of that night. I wondered what Liz was doing now. Had she stayed at the empty house with Sam? Were they scrambling, trying to salvage something? Maybe they'd found a hotel themselves. Maybe she was alone, sobbing because the father of her child had just turned into her worst nightmare. I rose from the bed, paced the small room. I remembered her gentle laugh when we first learned she was pregnant, when we thought it was mine. The memory turned sour, like everything else. Eventually, I flipped on the bathroom light, splashed cold water on my face, and stared in the mirror. A stubble shadowed my jaw. My eyes ringed with exhaustion. The man looking back at me was unrecognizable, tired, hard-edged. This is what betrayal does, I thought. You either let it break you, or you let it remake you. I dried off, returned to the bed, and sat cross-legged, phone in hand. I turned it back on. Instantly, a flood of missed calls and texts lit up. Most from Liz, a couple from Sam's number, and a few from my sister, asking if everything was okay. I sent my sister a quick reassurance. They're fine. Just keep them for now. I'll explain later. Then, out of morbid curiosity, I opened Sam's text. It read, "Mike, I know you're angry, but let's handle this like adults. The kids shouldn't pay for our mistakes. I'll do whatever it takes. Our mistakes. Plural." I supposed he was right, but the gall of him to think we could calmly talk about it at this hour made me grit my teeth. Liz had sent a series of frantic messages. Where are you? Can we talk? I'm so sorry, please answer me. I can't sleep, I'm worried about the kids. Her last text said, I know you hate me, but I love you. Don't shut me out forever. Forever. It repeated in my mind. Did I want to sever her from my life forever? Or just enough to make her understand the magnitude of her betrayal? If there was a glimmer of compassion left in me, it was buried under a mountain of pain. I typed a reply, short and cold. We'll talk about custody. That's all. Then hit send. I didn't respond to Sam. I left his message unanswered. A silent condemnation. The sun came up eventually, turning the motel room a sickly orange. I took a lukewarm shower, dressed, and headed out, ignoring the courtesy wave of the receptionist at the counter. On the drive to my sister's house, I felt the tension coil tighter in my chest. I knew I'd have to tell her something. She had the kids, my kids, and they'd want to know why their mother wasn't coming to pick them up. When I arrived, my daughter ran to me, arms wide, asking if everything was okay. My sister hovered in the background, confusion on her face. The boy, my son, Sam's son, clutched a plush toy, looking up with those big eyes that mirrored the man I hated. But I scooped him up, hugging him to my chest. Missed you, buddy, I whispered, meaning it. He laughed, burying his face in my shoulder. That moment nearly broke me. The realization that biologically he wasn't mine no longer mattered. He was my son in every way that counted. But how could I balance that love with the anger I felt toward Liz and Sam? I forced a smile, told the kids everything was fine, that we'd be doing something different for a while. Inside, my thoughts churned, 1,000 unresolved questions. I told my sister as much as I could manage. Liz and I are separating. It's complicated. The kids will stay with me. My sister looked worried, but she nodded, not pressing for details. She offered her spare bedroom if I needed more time. I thanked her, but I couldn't stand the idea of imposing. By evening, I drove the kids to a small rental property I found online. It was furnished enough to get by. We had no pictures on the walls, no real sense of home, but it was a roof, a bed, a place to hold them close. My daughter asked, "Where's Mom?" And I had to swallow the lump in my throat. "She's busy. We'll see her soon." It was around that time I got a call from a lawyer friend, responding to my earlier voicemail. We discussed the basics. I started the official process of filing for separation. I hated speaking about my marriage in legal terms, but it had to be done. Over the next days, the routine settled. The kids in the rental, me in and out of calls with attorneys, Liz bombarding me with messages, Sam mostly silent except for the occasional plea for understanding. At night, I replayed that moment in the studio, the sight of her blouse sliding off her shoulder, Sam's hand caressing her. Then I recalled how I'd stripped the house bare, leaving only a menacing message on loop. The guilt and satisfaction warred in my chest. I'd said I wanted revenge. Now that I had it, there was no relief, only the numb sense that I'd burned down every bridge, including my own. Liz did see the children again. A few supervised visits. My sister Oride was always present. She cried, apologized, pleaded for me to talk. But I just set the terms. No Sam. The kids shouldn't have to see him yet. She nodded, tears in her eyes, but complied. At one such visit, she cornered me in the hallway. "Mike, I never wanted to lose you." Her voice shook. "I know I messed up, but I still love you." I gazed at her, remembering our younger, happier selves, dancing to soft jazz, sipping whiskey kisses. "Liz," I said quiet, "I love the woman I married. I don't know who you are now." She looked like I'd stabbed her, but I had no more pity to give. That cold place inside me had grown. Days bowled into weeks. The legal process advanced. The scuttlebutt around the neighborhood was that we'd separated abruptly. People whispered about affairs, but no one had the full story. Liz moved in temporarily with a friend. Sam was presumably painting somewhere, or maybe he'd found a new studio. I tried not to care. Then came the day of the official hearing for custody arrangements. Liz wore a subdued dress, hair tied back. She couldn't meet my eyes. Sam wasn't there. No right to be. My heart pounded as we approached the judge. Lawyers spoke. Details were hashed out. The paternity test came to light. In the end, the judge ruled that the children would remain primarily with me for now, but Liz would have visitation. The boy's biological father could petition for rights if he chose. That hammered me in the chest. The knowledge that Sam might want partial custody someday. Afterward, Liz tried to speak with me in the corridor. Her voice trembled. "Mike, I'm sorry. I'll never stop being sorry. I hope one day you can. Forgive me." I glanced at her. For a split second, I saw the woman I once danced with in the living room. Then the memory of that letter, and the studio, flared up again. I exhaled slowly, letting the tension gather in my chest. "I don't know if I can," I said, "but I'll try not to let my anger harm the kids. That's the best I can do." She nodded, tears brimming. "I'll take that," she whispered. In the months that followed, I made good on my promise. I never warmed to Sam, never could. But I allowed Liz time with the children. As for me, I moved forward, day by day. I found a new place, hammered up a few old pictures that still meant something. The younger boy sometimes asks why Mommy doesn't stay with us, and I say we're figuring things out, in a gentle tone. I don't have the heart to explain the full scope of betrayal. Someday, maybe he'll piece it together. Late at night, I still think about that day in the empty house, the echo of my voice on the recorder, how it must have rattled their souls. Did they deserve it? A part of me says yes. They destroyed my life's foundation. Another part of me wonders if I became the villain in that final scene, stepping over a moral line I can't uncross. But then, I remember how Liz moaned for Sam, her body yielding to him without restraint. I remember the letter, the test results, the quiet heartbreak in the eyes of that small boy I love, who I'm not related to by blood. I remember how lonely nights in our bed felt while she was sneaking off. And I realize revenge might not cure heartbreak, but it can sure as hell make you feel alive for a moment. Let you stand up and say, no more. The last time I heard from Sam directly was a single text. I won't fight you for custody. I just want Liz to be happy. I'm sorry for everything. I never replied. I never believed his apology, anyway. Sometimes I kiss my daughter goodnight and watch my boy sleeping, and a dull ache spreads in my chest. A longing for the family we almost had, the trust we once shared. But trust is fragile. Once you break it, the pieces can cut you deep. And while the coldness in me has started to thaw, inch by inch, I doubt I'll ever see Liz the same way again. Still, I greet each day with a sense of forward motion. My children need me. My life, though shattered, can be rebuilt on new terms. And so I start each morning remembering the taste of whiskey on my lips, once a symbol of love, now a reminder that everything can turn bitter if neglected. I set down the glass. I pick up the responsibilities of fatherhood. I remember, always, that cold is also an emotion, and I used it to protect myself. At least, that's what I tell myself. Because in the end, some decisions can't be undone, and certain betrayals can't be forgiven. The only choice left is to keep going, keep breathing, keep living, and if necessary, keep your heart guarded so no one can break it again. I drive on.